and rows over standards of drinking water apart, we can take supplies of clean, fresh water for granted. But our grandparents weren't so lucky. The series on science, technology and everyday life reveals the fascinating history of this key area in our lives.
Everything needed repair, so he got out.
Everybody, this is BBC Home
A constant supply of fresh water piped to every home is a relatively recent convenience. Even for much of this century, unmodernized Victorian housing survived without bathrooms or inside toilets, even without hot and cold water. For many people in the poorer parts of cities, water for drinking or for washing had to be drawn from standpipes or wells. The 80 years from 1870 to 1950 saw a steady increase in the provision of public water supplies, which has had enormous benefits. Adequate water and proper sewerage have been two of the most important indices of social progress. With the growth of cities like Manchester, demands for water rapidly increased. This 1947 film celebrates Manchester's civic pride.
Ever since I can remember, the old city's never stopped growing. The more she's grown, the more it seems she's got to grow. Our people who've made it.
Manchester's water consumption went up from about 8 million gallons a day in 1855 to nearly 80 million by 1950. About half this consumption was domestic, the rest industrial. By 1870, it was clear that a new source of water would be needed to supplement existing supplies, and Manchester adopted a bold scheme. The proposal was to take water from Thirlmere, nearly 100 miles away in the English Lake District. It would involve building a dam and flooding the existing lake and valley. The proposal to flood a beautiful lakeland valley aroused great controversy in the 1870s. The Saturday Review called it the most monstrous piece of vandalism. In milder tones, John Ruskin wrote, "Manchester is plotting to steal the waters of Thirlmere and the clouds of Helvellyn." But the conservationists lost out at Thirlmere, and construction of the dam and huge aqueduct began in 1890. Built in solid masonry, the dam would raise the water level in the lake by 50 feet, creating a reservoir 3 miles long. The landscape around Thirlmere was changed forever. By 1894, this view of the lake and valley had disappeared. The dam complete, the reservoir gradually filled up. In 1971, the scheme featured in a BBC documentary.
Thirlmere was, and still is, an ideal spot. Rainfall reaches 90 inches a year, about 3 times the national average. And because of the local geology, the water is clear and colourless and soft, an excellent tipple just as it comes out of the lake. But the city fathers decided they'd prefer it without flies. So this outpost of a city's empire was built on the shore. It's a straining well, where down at the bottom, water passes through mesh screens which catch bits of leaves and twigs and insects. For as long as anybody can remember, the screens have been hauled up and cleaned every Monday, Wednesday and Friday morning. And that performance, for 40 years, was all that was done. Clean water from the lake, clean water at the tap. And to this day, all that's done by way of disinfection is to add a dose of chlorine at several points down the aqueduct.
Today, the straining well is no longer used, and treatment of the water is fully automated. But Thirlmere is still a bulk supplier.
This system supplies 45 million gallons per day, 365 days of the year. So it's quite a lot of water. The first water from this scheme, which was a pretty revolutionary scheme, actually reached Manchester in 1894. I say it was revolutionary in that it was the first, Manchester set itself up as the first bulk supply system at that time. Certainly in this country, and I believe I'm right in saying probably in Europe. Part of the Act stated that the local councils, district councils, whatever they passed through the line of the aqueduct, they were committed to supply water to that conurbation. And as such, it was a bulk supply system once completed. To actually attempt a scheme such as this, to take water, albeit by gravity, it's not a pump system, it's totally gravity, from a system some 100 miles from where the water is required, it was pretty revolutionary.
For the citizens of Manchester, the Thirlmere scheme provided water enough to change the pattern of their lives. This is the Victoria Baths, opened in 1903 and still in use today. Here there are swimming baths, slipper baths, showers and Turkish baths, all carefully segregated for prudish, class-conscious Edwardians. The first-class men's swimming bath, commonplace to us, but a big innovation when it was first opened, filled with heated, chlorinated, clean water. It offered the opportunity for hours of pleasant relaxation, or vigorous exercise for the more energetic. There was now so much water available. All at once people were finding new delights and new ways to enjoy its benefits. For the cost of a few pence you could come here to take a bath or a shower, or maybe relax in the Turkish bath. Plenty of encouragement here for personal hygiene and physical fitness. New ways of spending leisure hours. Women also made use of another benefit of the abundant new water supply. Municipal laundries were established where there were good facilities and ample supplies of hot and cold water. The architecture in this laundry dates from the late 1890s, although the fittings are modern. It still needed plenty of hard work to scrub away the grime of the industrial environment, but using the public laundry meant that all the mess of wash day could be kept out of the home. Another attraction was the communal nature of such laundries. They were meeting places. With the growing desire for greater cleanliness, soap had become an important commodity. Soap was made in batches by boiling a mixture of fats with strong alkalis for several days. The soap was then pressed into blocks, cut up, stamped and wrapped for sale. The annual consumption of soap in Britain was about 200,000 tonnes in 1880. It increased threefold by 1950. Firms like Pears, the CWS and Lever Brothers became household names. This film, made by Lever Brothers in 1919, shows that soap packing was labour-intensive work, mostly done by women. By the early 1930s, the quantities handled meant that it was essential to introduce machines for wrapping and packing, an early use of mechanised mass production in Britain. Initially, the wrappings were intended to prevent the soap deteriorating, but manufacturers soon recognised the marketing potential of packaging designs. competition between rival soap manufacturers was keen, and some were quick to see the commercial value of cosmetic effects like colour, perfume, texture, and even shape in marketing their new toilet soaps. Soap flakes and soap powders, which dissolve more easily than soap in tablet form, were also promoted for hand-washing delicate fabrics. In all such advertisements, there was a direct appeal to feminine pride and pleasure in personal and domestic hygiene, and in the freshly laundered look of her own and her family's clothes. By the 1930s, washing powder advertising was becoming highly professional. This film, seen by British and American cinema audiences, is part of a 6-minute cartoon made to advertise a new type of washing powder.
Come on, fellas. Can we help? Gee, look at this.
Well, if it's got to be done, it's got to be done. I better go and get the coal and light that copper again. My, how do those things get clean?
We washed them, yeah.
Washed them? You didn't have time.
Well, I guess I can explain that. You see, lady, it ain't necessary to boil clothes anymore. That was rinso in that there bowl. Rinso soaks them clean in just a few minutes.
The flush toilet, replacing the old privies and earth closets, was another development made possible by the availability of a reliable water supply. The early sanitary ware manufacturers introduced all kinds of decoration and designs in efforts to make the indoor water closet an obvious luxury for the middle and upper classes. But it was a long time before most working class homes were equipped with indoor toilets. There were, though, several less sophisticated devices, one of which is explained by Alan Wilson of the Greater Manchester Museum of Science and Industry.
A simple and inexpensive early form of water closet was the wastewater or tippler toilet. This relied on rainwater and wastewater from the sinks to flush a tippler mechanism. The tippler contained 4 gallons and when full, overbalanced and flushed the toilet.
The growing volumes of water in daily use put a great strain on the sewerage system, and extra maintenance was needed. Sewers large and small had to be regularly inspected and cleaned.
This, a really big one for its time, was built about 1830. It used to deliver its load directly to a river, until the flow was diverted to a sewage works, probably about 1875. What they're doing here is to drag out settled sludge. It's a stinking, filthy job, done, like all sewer work, in constant danger from poisonous and explosive gases, from sudden flooding, from the accidental discharge into the sewer of scalding water or lethal chemicals, from disease caused by rat's urine, as well as the dangers of a normal industrial accident inherent in the setup.
By 1919, it was becoming clear that Thirlmere would soon be unable to cope with the ever-increasing demands. So a new scheme was planned, this time at Haweswater. Construction began in 1936.
This is Haweswater, where man is changing the face of nature. Through the center opening in the giant new dam, the water is still running. Soon it will be stopped, and the village of Mardale, the farms and roads in the valley, will be submerged beneath a man-made lake. Ton by ton, a quarter-mile barrier of concrete is being poured into place. 500,000 pounds worth of labor and material. From the mixing sheds, the giant buckets pour the concrete into funnels, from where it's fed by chute into the foundations of the dam. And all so that Manchester should have fresh water, nearly 100 miles away.
This was another controversial scheme which took 5 years to complete. Haweswater's surface area trebled. The reservoir is 4 miles long and provides twice as much water as Thirlmere. But the scheme was strongly opposed by lovers of lakeland scenery. Alfred Wainwright, the noted lakeland writer, made his lament in a BBC programme.
I think they've destroyed this valley. A reservoir is never like a natural lake. I've mentioned the shingly beaches and so on, and the trees overhanging the water. You don't get that now. I thought at the time it was the loveliest valley that I'd ever seen. It was a garden of flowers, contented cows and sheep, wild roses everywhere, hawthorn hedges in blossom. Also a very sad occasion, because the hotel was closed, the church had been dismantled, the few cottages at the well were abandoned, and of course at the bottom of the valley the great dam was being built.
Haweswater ensured an adequate supply of clean water for Manchester and other South Lancashire towns. Tap water came to be taken for granted, and townspeople considered it to be one of their basic rights.
Water was calling, draw some water now. The water will be going off shortly. Draw plenty of water now. The water main is broken in Springfield Lane. Draw plenty of water, please.
Stop to me anytime. Stop to me anytime. But any of us are broken if I don't. I envy this fella's got kids now. He manages it, I'll never know.
No, but it's right outside my door. It's inconvenient to me. I've got bleeding kids. First you have the water on, then you have it off. We've talking reports about it. Put it up to that one. No. So, well, it won't be long. The bloody blokes. They've not done a bleeding stroke on there. You know why it keeps breaking, don't you?
What?
Well, you know there's no support for the main, really. They're going across there.
Not my worry. I'm a ratepayer, Salford ratepayer. That's up to the blokes. That's the council worry, not me. I'm not paid for that.
No, but didn't you not ask me why it keeps breaking?
I want to know why the water is being turned off.
The Thirlmere and Haweswater schemes were ambitious in their day, but they were designed to solve the single problem of water supply. They were not part of larger schemes of water management, such as those introduced in the United States. One huge scheme tapped the water of the Colorado River system for the southwestern United States. Dams were built for hydroelectric power and irrigation. It was in part a job creation scheme backed by the weight of the national government. Another 1930s water management scheme was that of the Tennessee Valley Authority.
Down from Minnesota and Wisconsin, down to St. Paul, down to St. Louis and St. Joe, lumber for the new continent of the West, lumber for the new mills. We built 100 cities and 1,000 towns. But at what a cost?
Water ran straight off the deforested hillsides, causing soil erosion and increased river flow. This resulted in frequent catastrophic floods in the Mississippi Basin. In Tennessee, Arkansas, Illinois, Ohio, Kentucky, Louisiana, and even Missouri, land was flooded time after time.
1903, 1907, 1913, 1916, 1922, 1937. We built 100 cities and 1,000 towns, but at what a cost.
The Tennessee Valley Authority scheme was conceived as a way of regulating the flow of the Tennessee River, one of the main tributaries of the Mississippi. It was a huge interstate scheme in which state and federal authorities combined to overcome opposition and to finance the project. Thousands of jobs were created in the Depression, but the landscape was drastically changed. In 1943, the British Ministry of Information made a propaganda film advocating a similar scheme for Scotland.
But we'd like to know where we're at. As you were going, you'll soon be up and through. You had best go back to the main road, down there.
Okay, thanks. It's sure a beautiful country you have here. Yeah, it's a lot like my home back in the highlands of Tennessee. Yeah, way back.
Tennessee? Is it a sporting country like this?
Sure is, but before the TVA, it was as godforsaken and wasted as around here.
Just what do you mean by that?
Well, you wouldn't exactly call this civilization, would you? If the TVA got started over here, you'd soon see what we mean.
What? TVA, anyway?
What would you say it is, Jack? Well, it's the setup of the United States government. TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, to develop the whole Tennessee Valley. And that one valley, friend, is about the size of England and Scotland put together. It was nothing but a wilderness till Uncle Sam took over. You ought to see it now. We shifted whole mountains, dammed up dozens of rivers, built a bunch of power stations that make Niagara look like a watermill. We turn out enough juice, well, that's electricity, you know, to light up the whole of Europe. Cheap, too. It can be had by anyone for a few cents a day. We all used to be poor as church mice. Now there's millions of acres of new land opened up. Good land, too. There's work and a good living for everybody. Say, I guess you could do with a little TVA around here. So long, neighbor.
In Britain, such ambitious water management schemes have not been needed, nor would they have been welcomed. Water runoff from deforestation was never a serious problem, and environmental concern has helped prevent water use schemes from changing the landscape too drastically. Although Manchester now takes water from Ullswater and occasionally Windermere, as well as Thirlmere and Haweswater, environmental concern and opposition from conservationist groups in the 1960s forced the water authorities to draw this water without affecting lake boundaries and to install underground pumps to remove it silently. Since 1950, the map of the Lake District has remained intact and the natural beauty of the area has been preserved, whilst the people of industrial Lancashire continue to receive the benefits of its waters.
The final programme for this course looks at the choices women had about childbirth and contraception during the first half of this century. You can see choices and chances around midnight on Monday the 13th of September, which is a change to the date shown in students' broadcast calendars. On Radio 5 tomorrow, the series exploring the lives of the first industrial engineers discovers that